More people coming in over the next few minutes. The chalice lighting this evening is brief, and June is going to light the chalice while I read the words.
Yay.
This is a quote from James Vila Blake. "This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another." And so again, thanks all for joining. Just to introduce our facilitators again this evening. We have Doug Abell, who is a long-term UUCA member. He is a past board member and has served the congregation in many other capacities. Doug is a registered neutral with the Georgia Office on Dispute Resolution. Erin Golan is a psychotherapist and mental health counselor and Atlanta native. Prior to serving on the Human Relations Committee, Erin has enjoyed singing in the Phoenix Choir since 2016. Ines Hoster is a member of UUCA since 1988. She has served as a member of the board, as a lay minister, co-chair of the Social Justice Council, an RE teacher, mentor, and has organized healing with energy sessions for members after services. Additionally, Ines is a certified life coach, an energy therapy specialist, and a certified healing touch instructor. And John Merkel serves on the UCA board currently. He is the board liaison to the HRC. He's also served on the nominating committee, the small group ministry steering team, and he taught for 2 years in children's RE.
Okay. Are we on? Yes. So welcome to all of you tonight who are here either for the continuation from last Tuesday, or for the first time. We thank you for spending your time with us. Again, it will be an interactive presentation with information, discussion, and polls. Last Monday, we read our covenant together. Doug shared information about the history of covenantal relationship and how it evolved into its modern day form. We showed a video about the way you want to interact with people by careful listening, assuming the other person has good intentions, asking questions for clarification, using I statements, being mindful of other people's time, being helpful, etc. And then we looked at what people thought they and the community did well with where help was needed. So we concluded that everybody knew about the covenant and its content, and that UUCA as a whole does very well in the area of social justice outreach, helping people in need. However, people thought that we have a need in the area of conflict management. People are more likely to retreat from conflict than feeling comfortable engaging that person that they have a feeling with in a covenantal way. And tonight we will be looking at the boundaries of our committee, which you need to understand so we can be better of service to our members at UUCA. So, and we're going to ask all participants again if you have any questions from last time, if you have those now. Otherwise, we'll continue with Doug. Okay, I don't see any questions. So, Doug, would you continue, please?
Well, I think we're going to go with Erin next. She was going to highlight the poll that we didn't have time to get to last week. Was that correct? Am I right about that, Erin, or not?
Yes. You were going to invite discussion and questions, but if we're ready to move forward to the poll, let's do that.
Yeah.
and we can always come back if we skip something. So I appreciated everybody's, and we appreciated everybody's participation in the polls last week. I wanted to share for you tonight the results, and I think that we will find that we've got some common threads. Not surprising, but we do share some common threads of maybe what our needs are and where we believe we have fortes. So just as an overview, just a reminder, the 3 questions that we had asked were, I try to let other people finish their sentences before I start to speak. The second one is, during discussions, I check with the other person to see if I'm getting the point. And the third one was, if someone disagrees with me, I get defensive. So it looks like on the first one, letting others finish sentences before speaking, folks pretty much feel solid on that. So we've got the majority of folks rated themselves either 3 or 4. And the sorry, during discussions, I check with the other person to see if I'm getting the point. We had a lot of people rate 4 and 3. We also had a few rating 2 and 1. So, seldom or never. So it sounds like that could be an area that we will explore and the HRC might use for some additional training opportunities and RE opportunities. Now, the third question, if someone disagrees with me, I get defensive. We had the majority of people rate themselves right in the middle. We did have several, excuse me, rate themselves at 4. So that's pretty significant, I would say, as far as defensiveness goes. And defensiveness is what I would say, a communication, it does not foster, it does not help, let's say, for effective communication interpersonally. So the HRC is hoping to and planning to create some form of curriculum around defensiveness. So just in summary, it does sound like the congregation feels solid about not interrupting for the most part, and that the congregation maybe is in need of some education and practice around defensiveness. So those were the findings. And if anyone has any questions, speak up. Otherwise, I will kick it back to Doug.
Okay. All right, thanks, Erin. Okay, John, could you go ahead and, well, let me explain right quick what's going to happen. What I'm going to do at this point is really walk everyone through the Healthy Relations vision and function, mission, vision, and function statement. This is basically a document that we developed over the last several months to really just spell out what we see as the scope of our services and what we think we can offer to the congregation. This document was presented to the board back in November, and they reviewed it and have kind of endorsed it as our kind of charge, if you will, going forward. So I'm just going to really walk you through. I'm going to highlight just some key elements that are in the document. Also, a little bit later, I'm going to show you where to find this document on UUCA.org, okay? So this first point here, the HRC mission, it's really short, and I want everybody just to take a few moments and read those few little paragraphs there, beginning letter A, B, and then the 2 dots under B. If you will just take a moment, because I really want to say a few things about this. I want to make sure everybody has a chance to really kind of take this in. Okay, so I'll give you a moment or so to do that. Okay. I want to draw your attention to 1A there. The purpose of the Healthy Relations Committee is to promote loving and respectful relationships within our community. Well, the first thing I want to give a shout out to is Ines Bennett. Some of you may know Ines. She met with our group early on when we were first beginning to meet. She's herself a trained mediator, and she and I have done some mediation work together. We were chatting in this particular meeting about what our purpose was, and we were using all kinds of fancy language. And she just sort of stopped us and said, well, you know, it sounds like to me what you're saying is you want UUCA to be a more loving and respectful community. And all of a sudden, the lights went on for us. She put it so simply and so directly and so meaningfully that we just kind of grabbed onto that text, and we really have kind of continued to focus on that and to kind of really promise ourselves or to look for ourselves that that's really what we're about. We're about encourage the community to become more loving and more respectful. Okay. So again, thanks, Addis, for that insight and that helpfulness. Also, another key important to keep in mind is that all congregants share responsibility for abiding by the covenant at UUCA. In other words, we're all in it together, essentially. Everyone is responsible for the covenant. We as a committee, we're not the covenant hallway monitors. Okay, we don't keep people going on the right side of the hallway, getting to and from class. Our job is to facilitate information and education around the covenant and the skills that we think are important to being covenantal in our relationships. And we're also available to do facilitated conversations in situations where people are willing to come together that are experiencing a conflict in relation to something that's happened or something to do with their life at UUCA. So those are the two primary functions. But again, those functions are in support of enabling the congregation as a whole to be the owners, if you will, of the covenant and to hold ourselves responsible for that. Okay. John, if we can just skip down just a little bit. We have there, we zip by our vision there. Maybe John, I'm sorry, I went a little too fast. Could you go back just a little bit? I want to look at the vision right quick. I didn't highlight this, but the vision there, we felt like it was important for us to be able to assert where we're trying to get to, where we want the community to be, and how we think what we do will support the community in getting to a place where we're a healthy spiritual community, where the congregants interact with others in a caring, direct, open, and honest manner with trust and respect that's consistent with our principles and our covenant. And I think we know a lot about our principles. We hear a lot about the EU principles a lot. And we've not had quite as much, I think, exposure to what our covenant is about. But we see both of those documents as really guiding us forward in order to create that kind of community that's healthy, where we're able to communicate in effectively and in an open, honest, and trusting manner with each other. Okay. All right, John, if you could go down to number 3. Thank you. Okay, number 3 really gets at our functions. And there are, I think, 6 of these functions. 5 of them really have to do with essentially what we're thinking of as our primary mission. And that's really to embed the concepts and practices of the covenant of healthy relationship into the life and work of the congregation. Okay. And so that's really what we're focused on, looking for all kinds of ways to make us more aware of the covenant, what its practices are, and to enable all of us to live more deeply into it. So more specifically, we intend to promote awareness of the covenant, certainly with newcomers, visitors, friends, members, teams on the UUCA website, through social media, in worship services and ceremonies, in any other way we can think of. Anything that we think is appropriate, that we can get support for, that again brings us in a deeper knowledge, a deeper appreciation, and a deeper valuing of the covenant. That's what we want to be focused on. As Erin has said, as we mentioned last time, we do see ourselves in a large part doing education. So we anticipate doing workshops, presentations, etc., around all manner of topics. And you could list topics longer than my arm about that could relate, I think, to covenant. And we've given some examples there: peacemaking, appreciating and valuing others, etc., active listening, being empathetic. Also, we've talked with the board about doing on a regular basis, this says biannually, to do an assessment of the overall quality of healthy communications within the community. I think one of our poll questions last week focused on the importance of the covenant to those that participated in the poll. I think 87% of the people said, yes, the covenant is important to the well-being of our community. Well, if it's important to us, we need to find out how important is it to it? Where do we stand with it? What is our status with it as a community? So again, we're going to participate in what we want to do, some continuing not evaluation, but kind of assessment. Where are we with the covenant? What can we do to strengthen the covenant? et cetera, going forward. In fact, the polling that we've been doing, that's part of a test document I'll talk a little bit about later that that we're hoping to develop and to use going forward. Letter E there, support teams and groups within the community who wish to develop a team or group specific covenant. We have several, the board has a covenant, the staff has a covenant, we have our congregational covenant. A lot of congregations have separate teams and groups. And so if someone is interested in developing a covenant for their group, I think we have some help we can offer in that regard to help an individual, to help a group kind of come together with that. Letter F really speaks to our function to do specific constructive conversations with willing persons when disagreements or doubts, where disagreements or disputes related to UUCA involvement come about, and where people feel like there's some perceived or actual harm to themselves or to others. Again, this gets into that part of our mission of sort of facilitating conversation, again, when there's difficulties or issues with folks, okay? John, we can move on down a little bit. Number 4 there, okay. This item number 4 gets into a lot of the structure of the committee, how many members we have, who our liaisons are, et cetera. But this letter B has an important point I want to make about how we tend to operate, how we see ourselves as operating, that we are a committee of the board, and therefore we would be periodically reporting to the board what our activities are, what we plan on doing, what kind of training we might be involved in, et cetera. But I want to make the point, and it says here that in the last sentence, no sensitive or confidential information such as the names of an individual requesting assistance from the HRC, nor any concern or information shared by such individual will be reported to the board nor to the ARAMAC committee. We do have an ARAMAC committee, a member that's going to be joining us. We just wanted to be very clear that we will be reporting periodically to the board, but we will never report to the board anything that has to do with a facilitated conversation that we might have with congregants around their concerns or their issues, okay? You can go on down a little bit, John, through number 4. I'm not going to speak to everything on number 4 because, again, it's pretty much structural stuff, and it's kind of a little dry and boring. So we're going to just leave that to you to read on your own there. Okay. Letter 5 gets into some very specific points about how we will operate and the perspective from which we see ourselves operating. Letter A there says that we will focus on operating from the perspective that most conflicts that we might assist with can be resolved by good faith effort of individuals who live by our principles and who do their best to abide by our covenant of healthy relationships. So if someone comes to us, that's where we're going to get started from. We're going to assume everybody's come to seek some support or guidance from us, and they're coming in good faith. And if people are behaving in good faith, we're going to be much more likely to help. They will be able to much more likely resolve and to get the assistance that they want. That we see ourselves as responding to congregants with compassion and respect, so that congregants will feel safe enough to risk being honest, feel empowered to express their feelings, and to acknowledge mistakes. On further down at letter G there, when assistance is requested, the congregant can expect HRC members to deeply listen to their concerns, to respond in an impartial, neutral, and non-judgmental manner. The HRC may recommend written resources, processes, or action steps that the person can take to address their concerns. Again, we're trying to set out expectations for what people can expect if they contact us. And that point there that we will be neutral and impartial, we are not going to take anybody's side on anything. We are there to listen. We're there to kind of help people express their feelings, their thoughts, their concerns, and help foster mutual understanding and appreciation of each other's situation. Okay. If again, in that instance where we might be called upon to help with that. Okay. I want to be real specific though about the kinds of situations. Give you a couple of examples of sort of conflict situations that we would see as being helpful with, and also a situation where we probably would not be the best resource. We imagine a situation that an individual might experience a situation where they're feeling perhaps disrespected or feel like something happened that they felt in some way distressed about that situation. But that individual doesn't know what to do. They don't know how to go forward. They know they want to do something. They're just not comfortable or not sure how they can marshal their own resources to move forward. That would be a situation where we think we would be willing and very available to help folks, is to kind of sit with that individual, help them reflect on what they think they need, what their goals would be, how they might approach maybe speaking directly with whomever it is they might be having a difficulty or an issue. Okay. We also see as within our kind of charge that of helping individuals that, you know, get out of sorts with each other for who knows what kinds of reasons. There can always be, you know, misperceptions, some harsh words might be exchanged for whatever reasons over some issue. If those two folks realize that, hey, we're not in right relationship and we need some help, we need some folks to listen to what happened and help us figure out what we can do to get back into right relationship, then that's a situation where we think that we could be maybe supportive and helpful to folks. We don't see ourselves really involved in situations that are extremely highly personal in nature. And an example I think about that would be, we could have couples or members of the community and maybe they share income sources and they're disputing about how to manage their budget, okay? That would not, in our view, have anything to do with the life of our community. It would have to do certainly with a personal issue they might be having. So that would not be the kind of situation that people would hopefully bring to us. If that would be something that we could maybe pastoral care might help them with, or maybe there are other resources that we could maybe find for that person. But so if an individual or even individuals within the community, if they're experiencing, again, a very unique and personal concern or issue that may involve someone else in the community, that's not necessarily something that we see ourselves kind of being being able to be helpful with. Okay. All righty. So those are the highlights, I think, of our charge statement, if you will. And we really would really like to find out from you guys, you know, maybe what questions you have about it, because again, this is our probably first time that maybe most of you all have ever seen this document. And we'd like to know what your questions are and see what we can clarify.
Hi, this is Laura Beth. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for all of your work with this. This is great, and I feel as a staff person the immense importance of a healthy covenant and a healthy structure around how that covenant is going to function and be upheld. And to that end, I wasn't here last Tuesday or on Sunday because I had meetings during both of those times. So please forgive me if this has already been covered. But reading through the document of how the HRC is going to function, I saw at the very end that there was a very explicit statement that said, you know, if in case of a serious breach, like where a safety issue, you know, comes up with a covenant, like that's something that you're not necessarily going to deal with. But I didn't see specifically in the wording, like if there is a breach to our congregational covenant, what is the process for that? Is it just like an obvious breach? So it may not even be a person coming to you and saying, so-and-so breached the covenant. So, because I saw a lot of like interpersonal conflict addressed, but if there's an obvious breach of the covenant, is that something that you talked about with the board as far as a process for that?
Okay. The serious breach, there's a serious breach of covenant policy.
Okay.
And in that policy, the board and the executive have responsibility for addressing issues related to the serious breach of the covenant. So again, we talked about that, and we didn't really say that that's in our bailiwick. Basically, if it's a serious breach, and you can look at that policy, a serious breach would be malfeasance. A serious breach would be flagrant disregard for the safety of another person, putting a child in jeopardy or something like that. We feel like that's beyond the HRC's capacity to address something of that nature. So that would have to be directed, I think, to the board or to the senior minister to address that issue, because they are, by our bylaws, they are responsible for the safety of the community. And so Does that help at all, Laura Beth?
So I guess my question was more specifically, well, what if it's just a regular breach of the covenant? Like there's a covenantal breach.
Okay.
How is that addressed to the individual who breaches the covenant? Nothing so as, as serious. Is that, what is the process for that, for calling them back in?
Okay. The process would be if someone came to me, for example, and said, I see this situation came up and I think that's a breach of the covenant. My response to them would say, what would you like to do about that?
Okay.
And then I would encourage that person to sort of reflect on that. And what we would do, I think, as a committee or a team would try to help work with that individual to sort of say, how do you want to address this issue? Because we're all responsible for the covenant.
Mm-hmm.
The entire committee is. And then we would basically, that would have to unfold itself in whatever way that it goes forward. We would work with that person. I don't think we would then take that word and then go out and speak to somebody directly.
Right. Yeah. Triangulation is never healthy.
Absolutely right. The idea would be that would be that situation where that person has experienced something, they're worried, concerned, and upset about it, and they don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And that I think we would see that as certainly within our realm of maybe providing support and assistance. But it sounds like to me that you think that might need to be made more explicit.
I think so, because I was specifically looking for if there is a breach in the covenant, then I just think it makes it more explicit for congregants to understand that the covenant for us is so important that there are repercussions if it is broken. Like, do you know what I'm saying? And not that they're going to get kicked out or excommunicated or anything, but just to understand that we hold this community as dear, and because we are not a creedal faith, the covenant is we are relational faith, and that is the basis of who we are. The covenant is so important, and I just I feel like it does need to be just a little more explicit.
Okay.
I have a question. Laura Beth, could you give an example of what you're talking about?
So, I mean, it could just be, I mean, I don't have the covenant in front of me right now. Can you just pull up the covenant? Because it'll just be easier for me to give a quick example based on our covenant.
I can get it up there in about 10 seconds.
Someone not using social media in a respectful manner, I believe, is part of our covenant.
Okay, so that's perfect, right? So if someone is being harmful or violent in their words on social media to another member, and that's very clearly out of covenant, that would be an example where I think the HRC could step in and help facilitate that.
Well, what we would want is for somebody, whoever was troubled by that, to come to the HRC.
But I also feel as HRC members, if you see that and you know it is out of covenant, that it is also your responsibility to call those people in as well.
If I observe something directly, I would say to folks, I'm sorry, folks, but what I've just observed to me does not comport with how we behave toward each other in this community. I would like for us to talk about that. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. So that's, I mean, and I guess what this all comes back to then congregates feeling like they are empowered and have a safe process for when they see that the covenant is breached in some way, then they know exactly where they can go, and they feel like that is a safe, comfortable process for them to do. So when it's more laid out, when it's more explicit, I just think that that's helpful all around. Okay, did you have another question for me?
No, I was just going to.
I just wanted to point out that I heard you say, Doug, that you all weren't going to be the covenant police, and so it sounds like there's a gray area there. Yes. Between people coming to the covenant, to the committee, asking for help, and being proactively policing the environment. And we have never had that. We've had a covenant of healthy relationships for 25 years, but there's never been a real clear path. And I guess there are reasons for that. I mean, it usually involves the staff and the minister, pretty quickly if it's some kind of But I just think it is a gray area. I'm not sure if it is clear. Hildegard, Barbara, you've been involved, and Hildegard, you too, I think, in the past, right?
Involved in, what are you saying?
When, issues came up around problems among congregants.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it does seem like it's a gray area, but I imagine that the committee will grow as the covenant becomes more well-known and embraced by the community. Then I think we'll probably work a lot of that out, I would guess. But I do like what Laura Beth said about having that be a little bit more explicit in the covenant itself. Like, where do we go and how do we do it?
Sean has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just that is, kind of along those lines, sort of whether there's a system of accountability for people who are consistent or sort of repeat offenders. One of the issues, and I don't know this. I know this doesn't have an answer, which is why I'm asking it. But and to your point, Laura Beth, I think, yeah, we're still sort of narrowing in that gray area. Like, this is I think, initial effort, or at least for the board that I've been a part of, we're trying to sort of integrate the covenant into the fabric of UUCA's culture.
Sure.
And, as we come to accept and understand what that means and how we interact with that. So I think that's why I think the first mission here for the HRC that they're expressing is sort of education and skills around how all of us can call people out on covenant, and kind of like what we said last time of how we can be vulnerable, courageously vulnerable enough to express when we feel hurt. That may not even be an express violation of our covenant. It may just be, hey, I think, or to me, I see the skills like as all of us, and the spiritual aspect of this is all of us growing that resilience within ourselves and in our community of how to say and be vulnerable and say, hey, I hope you didn't mean it, or I know you didn't mean it, but whatever you did or something you said or whatever had an impact on me or hurt me. And then, hopefully the skills will help everyone resolve those in a much more loving and caring way. But I do think there's a gap here in terms of people who are kind of repeat offenders and sort of what's the mechanism of accountability, or, what's a clearly defined escalation. The idea that the HRC would never under any circumstances share names with the board, to me, is a lapse in how that part of the HRC is defined, because I think there are situations where if both parties agree, the board needs to be made aware of who the parties are, what their names are, and what the details they've shared with the HRC is or grammar. But and so instead of the board having to conduct its own fact-finding inquiry or have the same conversations over again. So that's something that I wanted to raise. But I agree that I'm mulling over in my mind what would a system of accountability look like, or that kind of thing. So, as well as record keeping. If it happened 5 years ago, but it's super serious, the board will have changed, staff may have changed. How do we keep a record so that, not to punish people, but so that we don't have folks who are completely unaccountable within our congregation, continually violating the covenant and hurting people and not being held accountable for that. Because they end up pushing they can end up pushing more people away from our community that would stay or could have a home. So things to ponder.
That's really helpful, Sean. Thank you.
And these are great things for the HRC to consider. A lot of this will, I think a lot of this these questions, some of them will be answered, or at least will come into light as we move forward in handling a lot of these, potential and upcoming issues.
I just wanted to add that, following on what we talked about last week, that I think that I really am excited about the HRC moving forward with some training in conflict resolution, or with how to have a hard conversation that we all are so averse to, or found so awkward and challenging. And that, I think that really excites me, and I think it will in the congregation. And I think that the more visible the HRC is, in that sort of role of expertise in that area, or bringing in people who are expert for trainings that would be helpful in people's own lives as well, private lives, as well as in their congregational life, that people will be more aware that of what these expectations really mean and how they can be resolved. And then the step toward how you would resolve them if people don't cooperate is a logical next step after that. I don't think that's the step you need to go to first. I guess is what I'm saying.
Other questions? Thanks. This is really great. Thank you.
Doug, we ready for the polls?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm got all my notes are mixed up here at the moment. So yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, let's go and next poll. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Doug. All right. So more polls. I will say that, or I want everybody to keep in mind, though, that this poll is going to look a little different than the ones you've seen before. So please do pay attention carefully to the instructions. This time around, we're going to have, there will be 3 questions that'll come up on your screen once I signal John to pop them up for you. And they address 3 different issues. We would like for everybody to rate the 3 in order of importance or relevance to you personally. I'll let you know those 3 things in just a moment, but there will be, the responses will be 1, 2, or 3. So please rate in order of, whichever one's priority, make sure you hit 1 on that. All right, so the first one you'll see relates to resolving conflict. The second one you'll see relates to interpersonal communication skills. And the third one you'll see is responding to disrespectful non-covenantal conduct. So I'm going to just read the direct questions here. I believe UUCA congregants can benefit from training related to resolving conflict. That's the first one. Second one is, I believe UUCA congregants can benefit from training related to interpersonal communication skills. 1 through 3. And the third one, I believe UUCA congregants can benefit from training related to recommended and or best practices for responding to disrespectful non-covenantal conduct. So does anybody need any clarification on instructions before I signal John?
I do.
Great, yes, John.
So you want a poll with those 3 things on it, and then they choose one of them?
No, 3
No,
polls.
okay. 3 polls, okay.
3 polls, but then if everyone would keep in mind which one you'd
Okay.
like to rate number 1.
Okay.
Any participants have questions or clarifications needed? Okay, great. John, will you pop up those polls for everybody? Thank you. And it says agree, neutral, or disagree. Please just keep in mind, rank them in order of priority, just 1, 2, or 3. What would you like to see the HRC come out with as far as training resources work? And if anybody needs me to read them again, I will. That's fine. Just let me know.
And should I go ahead and do the next poll?
Yes. Thank you. And the third poll, whenever you're ready, John. All right, everybody, thank you so much for your feedback on that. We will get those results calculated, and that will help us just to discern really what the majority is looking for. So thank you. All right, I am going to kick it off back to Doug.
Okay, great. Thank you. Earlier, I promised I was going to show you where to find that HRC mission, vision, and functions document, as well as some other resources that we already have pulled together that we think will be relevant for the community. And what we're going to do here, John's going to kind of take us out to uuca.org. We're going to walk through a little bit about how to find out more information about HRC and kind of where we're putting things out there for folks. Okay, if you go to our UUCA page, there's actually two ways to get to that document I mentioned. One, you can go over to the search window, the little magnifying glass icon. If you just type in healthy relations and then you click enter, that will open up a page there. And actually that first item there, healthy relationships, if you click on that, you will actually be taken to their healthy relationships communication information page. And first you see some smiling, happy faces saying, welcome to the page, welcome to the page. We're glad you came to visit us. You may know some of these folks, if you will. So again, this is up and running today as we speak. So if you want to just scroll on down, there's again some introductory information. The first document that you come to is called HRC, What Congregants Need to Know. It's kind of an FAQ kind of document. It's very short. It just hits the reasoning behind the board, why they created us, if you will, a little bit about confidentiality, how that's going to be handled, how you can contact members of the HRC at our email address, et cetera. Again, we thought that would be the first thing. Here's just some basic facts everybody might need to know about the HRC and how it works, okay? So that's there. It's a very short little document. Doesn't take long for you to read through that. So if you scroll down, and that was automatically opened. When you get to the page, it's already open for you. Now, if you click on the next item there, our UUCA covenant, this is where someone can go and actually click on that button and the covenant comes up. So if someone wants to read and review the covenant, they can go to the page and there it is. You can also just go to the search window and put in UUCA covenant and you'll also be taken to the covenant. So you can get to it in either way, if you will, okay? So there's the covenant there for folks to look at. The next item, if you click on that, John, maybe I can speak about that just for a moment. Okay. Right now, this is, I would say, the meaning of covenant. This is an interactive PowerPoint presentation. It actually covers some of the material we covered last week. Right now, we're still working on this, so this is still a little under construction at the moment. We've got a little more work to do on this, but the idea was to have something available to people, maybe newcomers, people that are just coming to the community that might want just a basic, quick little information about, well, what is this thing called covenant? What does it have to do with Unitarian Universalism? Again, it only has 5 slides, seven slides to it, but there's some links to some other documents that you can get to, some readings that are involved in it. So we believe it's going to be very helpful, particularly for that person that just wants a quick review of some basics around covenant, okay? If you go on down, John, to the HRC mission and vision, again, that's the document we went over. You can click on that and the document opens up. And actually the best way to read it, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you can actually download it and you actually get it in the format that we looked at it this evening. So again, it's there. It's the same text. It's just not quite in the same exact format. And the last item on that, or not the next to the last item, is our additional resources. We've already compiled a good many resources because we really believe that a lot of the learning that can go on around covenant and what it means to us, a lot of people can do that on their own. You don't need to necessarily come to an HRC class or some other class to learn about what it means to be in covenant. So John, if you go back up to the top of the document there, I just want to make some comments right quick. There you go. So again, what we have here is some self-study resources that can enhance communications and conflict resolution skills, as well as UU perspectives on what it means to live in covenant with others. And so we have kind of two groupings right now. We have some communications and conflict resolution skills, respectful conversations. If you were with us last week, we watched that video together. It's very good. It gives you 6 key points to keep in mind when you're going to have a conflict, a discussion that may involve conflict or differences of opinion. If you go on down to resolving conflicts, that's really a delightful 2-minute animated piece around conflict and some best ways of dealing with it when it comes up in the community. Finding confidence in conflict, that's a TED Talk by this really very energetic attorney, and he talks about compassionate curiosity and how incredibly important that is if you're dealing with differences of opinion. To become curious is your way through, it's your way to build relationship, if you will. He does a great job of talking about how to use that in your time. There's a very lengthy Under Difficult Conversations. It's an hour program. It's a great program, but it's from by two UU ministers in the Pacific Northwest Conference. And it's our workshop just on how to have difficult conversations in the context of the Unitarian Universalist communities, if you will. It's a great video for folks. We have 2 books that are there, Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. That's been around for a long time. It's a great book to talk about, again, how you can go about getting agreements with folks. And then there's the classic Marshall Rosenberg's book, Nonviolent Communications, The Language of Life. If I had one book I would have everybody in the congregation read, it would be that one. It's a stellar book. We can go on down. Again, a lot of these are UUA videos about covenant and what it means, how to have faithful dissent. I think we really need to appreciate and value that we come out of dissent. That's how we got started, if you will, as a religious movement, is by saying, well, wait a minute, we don't think that's true. We don't think that's valid. There are other sources that we need to look at. So again, dissent has been a part of our identity for a long, long time, but how to have faithful dissent and how to deal with that when in a creative and helpful way is kind of what that's about. But a lot of great articles there. And again, they're there. None of those cost you anything. Then you have our team of folks that are ready, willing, and available to kind of help out and help out with this work. So again, that's how you find some key documents, and we intend to continue to add significantly to the resources. We already got bunches of things we already want to add to that. So again, we see that those resources as ways to help people get started, do a lot of this work on their own if they're motivated to do so. So
I'll also point out that you can get to our website at the very bottom here.
That's right. Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, at the very bottom of the UUCA page. There you go. Thanks. Okay. All righty, I'm going to go right on along and talk a little bit about an idea we're having. Again, the polls that you've been experiencing in this program. One of the ideas that we are considering doing is that of doing what we're calling a covenantal assessment survey. And it would be a series of questions to really sample larger groups of the congregation than we've done so far around kind of where they see themselves, how they see the covenant, what kinds of, again, skills and capacities that they would be interested in developing, if you will. And what we're looking for really is a group of volunteers that would be willing to that would test out a draft version of our document that we've been working on. And so we were going to make that offer to you all first. Since you showed up for this, that means you're interested in covenant, right? So maybe you would be good volunteers to help us craft a tool, because surveys have they're delicate instruments, and so we would need to be really thoughtful about how to put that together and how to put that out there. And again, we do have some ideas, and we'd like to enlist your help in helping us craft that tool that we think would be useful. Again, if something's important, there's a saying, what gets inspected gets respected. And so inspecting the covenant is a way to generate respect for it, I believe. So if you would just maybe put in the chat or just raise your hand. I think, John, you were going to take names of people that would be interested. So if you'd be interested in being one of our testers for our assessment survey, just wave at us or put in the chat, I'll volunteer or something like that, just so we know how to get back in touch with you. It'll probably be a couple of weeks before we have this ready to go. and it will probably come to you as a Survey Monkey kind of tool, probably taking maybe 10 to 15 minutes to complete it at most.
Yeah, if you could just put your name in the chat, I'll record it if there's anyone interested.
Okay, wow. A bunch of UUs, exactly what I would expect. A lot of volunteering. Thank you so much. Okay, very good. Okay, well, we have moved through in record time. I think we're really getting kind of close to a time where we really want to open it up for any and all questions or discussion points. Or so, Ines, or you wanna?
Well, I wanted to know whether we have the results of the polls that we asked about earlier.
I did pass the information on to Erin if Erin wants to discuss them. Do you have them, Erin?
Okay. Alrighty. I'm unmuted, right? I do have them pulled up. All right. So the primary, it appears the primary need, or at least what everyone here tonight has expressed, was number one. I believe UUCA congregants can benefit from training related to resolving conflict. So that does appear to be at the forefront these days, I think, from a lot of voices. At least that's what I'm gathering from a lot of the voices we've been hearing tonight, and in other meetings. So that does appear to be a priority. The next priority item, and it was a close call, is the third one. So I believe UUCA congregants can benefit from training related to recommended and best practices for responding to disrespectful, non-covenantal, I still need to learn how to pronounce that word, non-covenantal conduct. So we had 73 people rate that as number one on their priority list. So looks like we will likely be focused on conflict resolution and conduct and how to relate with one another, perhaps more so than just communication, which was the second question. Does anyone have feedback or thoughts or questions about the poll and those responses and what those might indicate? All right.
Any reflections from anyone on I think Taryn mentioned this in the service on Sunday, that and it's the current sermons series is on conflict resilience, and she made mention of the fact that we, and I don't know if she meant we UUCA or we as Unitarian Universalists, tend to have an avoidance of conflict, and I'd like some thoughts. Why is that? What is it? What makes that? Why are we uncomfortable with that? Any thoughts on that? What's the? I'm just curious, since I've heard about that. Yes, Laura Beth, go ahead.
I'm realizing that I'm talking a lot, so I'm happy to step back if somebody else would like to address this first.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think I mean, starting with just the fact that conflict avoidance is one of the characteristics of Tima Okun's document of white supremacy, that conflict avoidance is just part of white supremacy culture. We're not trained to engage in conflict. So I think that is part of it. We don't, like, it's, I didn't have any courses in school that taught me how to avoid conflict. I'm sorry, how to deal with conflict, avoid it in many different ways. And what I have found serving in congregations in the North and now in the South, that in the North, what happens is that when it comes to conflict, people are much more likely to just say it like it is and just like name it right up front. And what that can sometimes do is it will start to escalate emotions and stuff because they haven't said it well. It's just that's just something that I noticed, especially having come from the South, where here I have found that people either hold it back and don't want to upset anyone, or it comes out as passive aggressive in some way, or it just becomes like a building resentment until everything explodes. And so I feel like we don't, like, I haven't seen conflict addressed in really good ways and a general, by the general population, either in the congregations I served in New York and New Jersey or here. And what I have seen here, I just realized today that as 6 weeks from today, I will have been here a year. And what I noticed is that this congregation is, I mean, so loving and caring and compassionate and so well connected, and everybody really looks out for each other. And I do see that this congregation honestly has, in my mind, has more of a collective mentality than an individualist mentality than most of the congregations I've served. Don't tell the others. So I feel like there's so many, like there's like UUCA is such a strong community. And because of that, I feel like there's this fear that if there's any conflict, it's going to disrupt that amazing bond, or that, you know, and what I have noticed, or my experience has been, is that when people are able to be vulnerable and are able to address the conflict, it only increases the bonds, right? It only strengthens those bonds. And so I would like to see UUCA, you know, be able to learn how to engage in conflict. So I was very excited on Sunday during the social hour when Ines was talking some about what your plans were. So that's really exciting.
Thank you, Laura Beth.
Thank you.
Who else? Barbara, you had your hands up earlier.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to me, and Laura Beth just said the word vulnerability, you know, and also I think, you know, when we go and address like how we feel in conflict, it puts us in a vulnerable and fearful place, maybe fear of not being liked. And I do share with what Laura Beth said, you know, keeping the status quo. So but vulnerability, it's like it's a risky thing to go and address conflictual stuff with somebody. The fear of, you know, maybe getting shot down or harmed in some way. Vulnerable is the only word that I can really come. It's there, and there's a skill to it. And I think that having workshops and talking about it, because I think it can be done in a compassionate way, conflict. It doesn't, you know, the term sounds aggressive, and I don't think it has to be aggressive. I think we can address each other in a loving way and address conflict in a loving way. And I think that is a skill that has to be practiced and taught. So.
Yeah, and I agree with you. This is not the kind of thing that you can learn in a 1 hour session. You know, there are many good ways to set up courses over a period where you get to test yourself and train yourself in being better with communications.
Yeah, I also think again, I'm back to the idea of surveying. I think giving people information about what their observations are around conflict, I think that helps people maybe begin to think, and also to think about conflict is a very creative enterprise as well as a vulnerable enterprise. I mean, there can be such good things that can come from it because it unfreezes people. It kind of opens one's eyes. It has that potential anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of one of the reasons why we only think of it in the sort of it's going to be hard to do. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to get hurt if I do it. as opposed to realizing, yeah, some of that can happen, but also what could be the benefit of it? How could we be better? How could we get better? How could we think differently than we do? So I think that's part of our challenge is how to see some positives in learning those skills and learning those capacities.
One thing to add is that those things, Kay, sorry, go ahead, Kay.
Well, I was just going to say that I think the first thing is to recognize that the word conflict in our culture really is a negative word.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I mean, I just Googled it, and the definition is a serious fight or battle. I mean, or that's one of them, and I think that's what's ingrained in all of us. So I think that's the first thing, but that it doesn't have to be that way. It really is a difference. So if we appreciate differences, then we appreciate the conflict that's inherent in that, or can be inherent in that. But I think for us as UUs, what resonated with me about Taryn's comment was what I said last week. We're much more comfortable with our intellect than our emotions. And to resolve conflict really means talking about your emotions, which means being vulnerable. But otherwise, you're just having an argument about what are right or wrong facts or something. I mean, there's a difference between a debate over factual information and a resolution of a personal feelings with another person. So I think that's part of what has to be recognized, and that our congregation is much more comfortable having an intellectual discussion than a conflict resolution kind of discussion.
And that's
what
true
will
of
be
most.
really important is to empower individuals in our congregation and the congregation as a whole, empower people to just have some conflict, right? To be vulnerable. That word keeps showing up, which is wonderful, because that is a word that I think that we need right now. But to empower folks to go ahead and bring something up with somebody, to let people in on their more vulnerable, hurt emotions. So with that said, empowerment, that for some might seem like a generalized a term, but when I say empower in this context, it's more showing and demonstrating to people what the benefit is and what the reward is, how ultimately learning to have healthy conflict or confrontation, learning to have healthy conversations about emotions makes us, I would say, better UUs, dare I even say. So empowerment is a big word I just really want to emphasize, in case y'all didn't hear empowerment in this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think liberation, I mean, like, as I've started to do this work, there's something very liberating about like acknowledging my own emotions and getting in touch with them. I mean, I do think, especially from a male perspective, that a lot of times I find myself just not even aware or able to name, or like, I've spent so long discrediting my own emotions or disregarding them that it's almost, a skill that a foundational skill I'm having to acquire and practice, just checking in with myself, naming emotions, acknowledging to myself that I have them and that's okay. But there's a lot of fear of that, like, and it's very scary not knowing or not having like really delved into my own emotions as much as, I think is really healthy. And so I think that there's a liberation, there's a strength in that. I mean, I was kind of inspired by last week's session and kind of a little bit, and practiced a little bit of like what I would call radical vulnerability. And, even though the other party didn't respond in a way that was like affirming or respectful or like, great, I felt really good. I mean, I didn't feel really good all around, but like it was a dialectic for sure. But I felt really liberated. I felt really empowered. I felt really good about myself in that. I didn't feel great about the situation, but better than feeling worse about myself in a bad situation is feeling good about myself in a bad situation. So I think that's one of the benefits of that kind of vulnerability, is that once you develop and become comfortable with the skill, it really, I think, it's like, yeah, gives you that silver lining.
John, I
There I
think
see.
you bring up a very important point, and that is many of us are so well at home in our head, and we are not at home with our emotions, you know, with our feelings, and to need some training right around that part, I think could also be very helpful, which is a different aspect and a very important component of empowering yourself so that you feel comfortable going into a conflict resolution situation.
I think too, Sean, the other thing you said that resonated with me is, as part of liberation, is I feel like once a community is able to conflict well and expects that conflict may happen, then it's a lot easier to be that vulnerable in that way moving forward, that trust is built, that we all know and agree that we may be in conflict at this moment, but that our relationship will continue beyond that. So yeah, I like that sort of word of liberation to describe that relationship of trust.
Great.
I also, the other piece of that is the being able to receive the hard emotions from the person who is delivering them. And I think sometimes, I know for myself, I can get very defensive, or sometimes the person who is naming the issue can also be seen as the perpetrator rather than the person who is being harmed. And so I think that part of the conflict resolution, the piece that when I started learning conflict resolution, was the like getting beyond my defensiveness and really being able to listen to that hurt and honor it and recognize that the naming of it and the fact that they're taking the risk of naming it, putting themselves in a vulnerable place like that, is a very courageous act. And so when, but basically not blaming the person who has brought the conflict forward, because sometimes in order to erase it or to not have to deal with it, what ends up happening is that the person who brings the conflict forward gets blamed rather than the conflict actually being dealt with. So.
Thank you. What
Okay,
other kinds of questions do you have?
I wanted to address something, okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, Carol.
Okay. In the past, I've been a member of UUCA for a long time, and there's been a lot of conflicts, especially with our ministers. And I wasn't aware of it till later on, till after they left. And I find out that some people leave because they don't like the minister or they don't like something. And so I don't hear about it till later. So I wasn't aware of it. And so that kind of bothers me. But right now I know we're at a good place at UUCA. And I know we need another minister besides Erin and everything. So, but I'm just saying, I was thinking about the past, and I know I shouldn't be bringing that up, but that's what comes to mind when it comes to conflict resolution and things that wasn't addressed at the time, or maybe they were and I didn't know about it. So that's all I want to say is because I know that it existed in the past.
Are you talking about that there's an iceberg and you?
Yeah. With
you cannot see
with Anthony and with Edward, and especially when we had when we had an interim which was, I didn't like that. But anyway, but I didn't have issues with them. But I'm just saying I understand from other people who used to go to UUCA had issues, and I didn't know that at the time. So
I think you raised a really good point, Carol.
That kind of bothered me. That's all.
Yeah, that makes me think about like engaging versus avoiding. I think in some ways, like by making these conflicts, very secret, or maximizing the privacy, or maximizing the lack of transparency, and pretending like we are a community without any conflict, is not only untrue, but it's a disservice to all of us, because it robs us of the chance to grow, to learn from those mistakes, or if they're mistakes, or just to learn, to understand, and so, like, yeah, it's like a family, right? Like, if we're.
So it got me upset when they left and everything. I said, why did they leave? I didn't know what the reason was, and I found out reasons later. So, I'm just saying that at least in my situation, where I used to work at some places, I would be in avoidance, because it was like, okay, I'm low on the totem pole and I can't, and it's hard to talk about it. So, but I don't know what happened in this situation with, when it comes to our staff and everything.
Carol, one point you're making that I think is important, and this is, I think, one of the bigger issues that I think we're going to be trying to look at, is what is the UUCA culture, and kind of why does our culture hold on to regrets maybe for a long time? Because what I'm hearing you say is that at the time there were things going on that you were unaware of, and you later learned that people were very troubled and upset and angry, perhaps even, about some things that happened or what went on.
Yeah.
And
I'm not trying to bring up any.
No, I understand that, but
I'm just telling you what I know from the past. So.
No, but what I'm saying is, as a body, we don't lose memory of those things.
No,
they impact people. They live inside of people, and they're maybe not too under the surface. I don't know. I don't have anyone in my head at the moment, but
I can still tell you some stories, but I'm not going to say it right now. So, because it's in the past. But
I know, but I'm saying it is in the past, but it's also in the present culture. It exists today. It is that bad feeling is there, and I think it's avoidance of that bad feeling may help us understand a little bit better this avoidance of conflict. If I don't think bad thoughts, then bad things won't happen, kind of thing.
Can I just jump in here? My kind of always shy to speak in front of a group. This is not as difficult to do it with Zoom. Like what Carol is saying, I feel the same way, having been with UUCA for a long time. We have some, and like you just said, Doug, some leftover feelings that are bad that kind of hang on from things, not anything specific, but from just knowing that we have to sometimes deal with change. And I was telling Ines that what connects me so many years with UCA is that I feel like our church is bigger than just, one person or one minister. It's bigger than all the parts. Although we have a hard time, and I want to really admire what you're doing here, because our members, I think, are probably more individualistic than most traditional churches are. And yet we stress community. So I think it's really great that we're doing this to try to make people feel connected to our congregation. So.
Thank you, Gordon. I think we need to distinguish, as we have just not talked about, between two different kinds of things. And one is what is the culture of UUCA? How does UUCA at large deal with conflict, with empowering members to speak up, and also to be open about any kind of conflict, say with ministers or whatever. And on the other hand, and this is the part that the HSC is more addressing, and that is conflict among the members with each other.
Well, and it's something I'd just like to add is that part of conflict seems to be some conflict resolution may be inherent in our understanding of that is sort of a feeling that, well, we're going to get our way when it's over. And it ties up with our democratic process. You know, we say we believe in the democratic process. And yet there are many times when people don't get their way, they get mad and sometimes they leave. And
Right.
So there is an inherent conflict, if you will, you know, among some of our principles as well, you know, and some of our values that we have to kind of resolve in ourselves. And I don't have the answer, and I'm not the best at it, but I think conflict resolution doesn't necessarily mean you're going to walk away from it saying, well, I was right and they finally realized it. You know, I mean, it's
right. I mean, I think what it does do though, Mom, is give us the chance to say, well, I've done my best and I've been heard.
right.
Well, the other thing is, and you know, as we did our moving, for instance, there was conflict that came up. And I would say that the people who cannot get their way and therefore then leave really did not understand covenantal relationship. And maybe that is something that all of us need to be aware of. So when there is a conflict and somebody is trying to get away with whatever it is they want, that somebody else steps up to them and say, you are out of being in covenantal relationship. Let's address this. What is the issue here? How can we find a solution to this issue? You hurt other people and you feel hurt by them. What we want to avoid, I think, is for people who feel unhappy because, quote, they felt they hadn't been heard, that they therefore leave. And I think the strength of developing covenantal relationship lies in the fact that we can all learn to communicate better with each other and empower each other.
So, can I say something?
Sure.
I think this is going to take time. You know, I think, Carol, you talk about a situation that was really difficult in the past. This isn't something that gets fixed by one class or by one person taking charge. But if you think about it, we've had a number of sermons now that have talked about conflict. We've had 2 classes in adult RE. You know, over time, and I would imagine that this committee is going to go to other groups and make a similar presentation when they're asked to. And over time, people are going to hear and get to know the people on the committee and have trust. But my sense would be that this is going to take a while, and it's going to take us seeing something that works and saying, oh, I guess I could do that too. You know, I mean, I am the first to say I love quick fixes, so, you know, and instant gratification. But it feels like, I mean, maybe the committee can chime in, but it feels like we need to see some movement in this direction before we're all going to say, oh, that'll work. Okay, I could do that.
It's a journey, yes, and none of it will happen overnight, certainly, Hildegard. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. This is a work in progress. We are all a work in progress. So our skills to follow suit, to me at least, it makes sense. So as far as results go, and you know, this just came to mind here, but so as far as results go, one of my hopes is that those who do benefit from or find the classes, the workshops helpful, they will, spread the word for one, but also begin to utilize or practice, utilize, and most importantly, perhaps model those effective or, interpersonal effectiveness skills. And often when things are modeled, I have found at least that others will start to mirror the people who are modeling the healthier behaviors. So yes, this will take time, absolutely. And the HRC is very, very excited to get the ball rolling on it, because it's it's time. We're in a time when I say it's ripe for this work.
Sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's something about spiritual growth. I think at UUCA, we've had a lot of intellectual focus on intellectual growth and sort of social justice progress. But I think there's something that's very spiritual about the vulnerability and the community and the commitment to one another that we're asking everyone to just, think deeply and about how to really live our values that we've, it's one thing to know your values and intellectually understand them, but I think living them takes a certain emotional connection to them that I'm certainly excited to delve into and have this kind of bring us all into conversation and engagement with one another about that, because we do have all sorts of different perspectives and beliefs, and I don't know that we talk about that as much as could be rewarding and helpful. I'm hopeful that this will kind of get us to a place where we'll be more comfortable having those kinds of conversations.
Sean, you mentioned values and knowing our values compared to living our values. And something I'd like to offer on that note is just the suggestion of starting with ourselves to ask, what does it look like for me to live my values? Because living my values is a large concept. It can be very broad, but if I stop to think, how does that happen? How do I live my values? Because my husband, for example, lives his values in his way. So just to start asking ourselves these questions, we don't have to talk about them even, just to begin ruminating on some of those could be a great starting point. So I wanted to offer that.
And just to echo what Hildegard was saying, yeah, I never envisioned this. I think I told Erin when she asked me to be on this committee that I would give it a year. I'm probably already going to give it more than a year, okay? Because from the get-go, and I guess it's because I've been at UUCA for a long time, I love the place, warts and all, and so it is going to be a journey. And I think it begins as Erin just suggested, as we begin to reflect on our own, where we are, what I do, what that would look like for me, what's my part in this, and then as each one grapples with that, then the next one grapples with it, and the next one, and the next one, and then movement begins to happen, if you will. So yeah, I'm definitely not seeing this as a well, we'll do 3 or 4 workshops and we'll be in the promised land, kind of thing. So it's going to take some time.
I really like what Sean was commenting about, and I see us being able to step into a new maturation phase at UUCA. It's like we all know that we do very well with the social justice issues and all of that. And now it is time to address these spiritual issues with regard to how do we communicate with each other in an honest and trusting way. And that will get, I think, the whole community into a very different level of being. And I have no idea how long it will take. I would love for all of us to engage in 101 and then all of us move up to 202. you know, that kind of a thing. So we need to think about what would be the best way to reach the largest number of people to engage in this process in a meaningful way.
Venus, you know, y'all pointed out on your website about the different TED Talks and all that, and I'm looking forward to learning about that. I think that's what it should come from the pulpit or from Erin or somebody, or giving an announcement on a Sunday. That's one of the things, so they know about it, because I wasn't aware of it. I think it's great. I just want to let you know. Looking forward to that.
Thank you, Carol.
Carol, we thank you and we thank everybody for your participation tonight. It is so, so valuable. I'm noticing the time and it is 3 minutes until our promised wrap up time. So I just wanted to open the floor for final questions or thoughts before we wrap up. Again, really appreciate everyone being here tonight.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment to everybody, because I think all the people that spoke of what I think they're talking about, and what I feel anyway, is that it's trust. You're trying to build trust. And the more you can build that, whether you're talking about it or whether you're sharing it or whether you're just experiencing it, I think that's what that's the goal I think we're going towards.
Thanks.
You know, I just had an idea. As much as I have liked the social hours that we used to have when we were all getting together, I have really come to appreciate the social hours and getting into those smaller groups. And I think that as we are communicating with all kinds of different people that we may not have known before, and discussing some rather deep questions, how we are learning to open up to each other. I mean, yes, this is not about conflict situations, but just as a matter of being willing to open up about some very sensitive issues, like our deep spiritual experiences, you know? So that is, I think, a way that we learn to trust and to pull our little antennas out and see how far can I go before I go back in again. So I really see that as a very enriching period and as a way of strengthening all of us in developing more trust with each other. Any other statements, any other suggestions, any ideas that you have that you would like to communicate, and you can do it now, or you can send us an email. We are happy to read all of your suggestions and questions and get back with you.
Certainly, we really welcome feedback, and please keep I'm not sure who's in charge of reminding folks, but I'll do it. The survey, if y'all will remember to submit the survey if you have not used for the training, that will help us.
Also, June, isn't there a class evaluation that you all send?
Yeah, class evaluation. Thank you, Doug.
June, is that true or not? I thought.
We have not been doing it since we've been doing Zoom classes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
In that case, feel free to email us at healthyrelations@uuca.org with comments, thoughts, feedback from tonight.
And if you guys would like something to be sent out, I'd be happy to send it out to the group of registrants for adult RE classes this semester. I don't know that we have a specific list of people that joined last week in this, but let me know and I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
I'm just extinguishing our tiny little chalice.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thanks so much to the Healthy Relations Committee. Next week on Tuesday, we have a class on the Sociology of Religion, led by Jeff Guing, and he's a sociologist at UCLA. His research interests include education, culture, religion, and theory. And he studies the relationship between authority and moral life. And in this class, he is going to describe research questions that contemporary sociologists of religion are trying to answer. And we'll also discuss his own research on and take questions. And then also on Wednesday, we have a special Wednesday series led by Taryn in Larba.
We're pushing that back a week, just FYI. It's going to start on March 24th. That just came down today. So instead of starting on March 17th, it's going to start on February 17th. It's going to start on February 24th. Excuse me. Yeah.
Well, still something very much to look forward to, and that sort of ties into the theme of conflict, definitely. So I think that will be something that, a course that we could all really, a series that we could all really benefit from. Yeah, and thanks everyone for coming. Thanks to the HRC. Very much appreciate everyone's participation and efforts.
Yes, thank you, HRC.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Here.
Thank you.
Goodbye.